Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And again, thank you for joining us today. My name is actually Max Trombley. I'm the Senior Director of TRBOT's Marketing, Member Experience, and Analytics. And again, we want to welcome you to our wonderful presentation for one of our very, very valued member, Cisco, to talk about and sharing with us Beyond the Firewall, Cybersecurity Unveiled. That sounds like a movie. All kidding aside, I mean, this is actually a critical issue for small businesses. As a study from Cybercrime magazine showed that 43% of all cyber attacks target SMEs. What's actually even more scarier is 83% of those small businesses lack the financial preparation for recovery. And their study, it showed that almost 60% of these small businesses have to shut down post-attacks. So pretty scary stuff. We're lucky today to have, it'll be both an introduction and presentation about the situation with Marquez, and my friend Nathan will host the panel, which will be very animated with a bunch of colleagues from Cisco and from Softchoice. And they will help you basically share and develop an awareness and be prepared for such threats and developing strategies for detecting, protecting, and recovering from cyber attacks. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that this land that we're meeting is the home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board's offices are located on the traditional territory of the many indigenous nations. They share a sense of responsibility for intergenerational equality and the well-being of today and tomorrow. One final note, and we tried really, really hard to negotiate with the government, but at around 12:55, there's a province-wide emergency alert test. So your cell phone is going to be ringing really, really badly. Good news, it's better than 4 a.m. when it does happen. And we apologize in advance. At 12:55, your phone rings. Don't worry, we're all safe. Thank you. And without further notice, I will let the session start with Marquez. Thank you very much, everyone.
Appreciate it. So I'll try to move quickly to ensure that the alert doesn't disrupt the presentation. Afternoon, everyone. Marquez Ramsey, Security Specialist at Cisco, cover mid-market accounts across Ontario. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to customers, going to different cyber events, and just getting a better understanding of what's top of mind for our customers. And one thing that we recognize is that customers are at different places in their strategy and sort of their cycle around security. For some folks, they have more mature teams or larger teams and a strategy, and they're figuring out how are we protecting our cloud infrastructure. For other folks, it's around just figuring out what the strategy is. And so for them, maybe it's not necessarily a conversation around solution, but more so around advisory services and what that looks like. But essentially, our biggest takeaway is that security is tough. The threats are continuing to emerge. And so why go at it alone when you have folks like Cisco and Softchoice to be able to support you with that? So there's 4 pieces that I want to talk to you about today. The first one is why Cisco and what are the strategies that we're driving to support our customers through cyber preparedness. What is Zero Trust? What are the core capabilities around Zero Trust? Just because I feel like it's a term that's thrown out often. Is Zero Trust a product? Is it a solution? And then I'll speak more specifically in terms of how Cisco is empowering our customers and partners to be able to protect their users, or what I like to call as the human firewall. And then lastly, what can organizations do now to be able to address some of the risks within their environments? So when I think about Cisco security, I think about Talos, which is one of our biggest differentiators. Just by a show of hands, is anyone familiar with Talos? Perfect. So it means our marketing team is doing a great job. But essentially what Talos is the largest non-governmental threat intelligence organization in the world, with over 400 researchers and analysts working 24/7 365 days a year throughout the globe. What they're essentially doing is looking for zero-day threats, new ransomware alerts, and pouring that intelligence back into all of our Cisco secure infrastructure. Through that, we protect over 87 million endpoints. We see 62 billion web requests per day, over 840,000 protected networks, and 67 million protected mailboxes. When you strip that all down, what does it mean? Essentially, the more that you see is the more that we have the ability to block. So when you think about the security solutions that you're investing in, you want to ask yourself, what is the intelligence that's feeding into their solutions? Do they have a threat intelligence agency behind them that's constantly feeding updates into your cybersecurity solutions? And Talos is more than just a threat intelligence organization. There's also a number of business services that it offers. It offers both reactive and proactive supports to our customers, whether it's pen testing to understand what the vulnerabilities are in your environment, to tabletopping, exercising, purple teaming and red teaming, to understand what would it look like if someone was to breach our environment. But we also have real in-time services for our customers, recognizing that the sad truth is that folks do get breached. And so what does that look like? What are the supports in place? And so we have emergency response, incident response retainers that were enabled to act up and get folks pen to paper, manually being able to look into your environment, understand where the breach happened, and then provide containment. I think when folks think about Cisco, generally there's one thing that Cisco is known for in the market, and it's not the food trucks, but networking, right? Cisco essentially powered the internet. And so often when we think about Cisco, we think about what a great networking company it is. And so Cisco's put a lot of R&D and investment over the last few years to ensure that we're building out our security architecture. What is our security strategy? How are we making it simple and easy for our customers to be able to consume? And so when you look at this slide, I know it's a lot and it's busy. And so what I don't want you to take away is that you need to invest in all of this and put it in your environments now. But if we look at the top, we have Talos, right? And I mentioned Talos earlier. Talos is what's feeding the threat intelligence across all of our solutions to ensure that you don't have to be attacked in order to protect yourself against zero-day threats. Cisco is the only security vendor in the market that has the ability to provide protection across your users, whether you're moving up to cloud infrastructure, all the way across your data centers. And so for the purpose of today, I'm going to be focused on user security, and so I've highlighted some of the core capabilities of what that looks like, and we'll walk through it in my presentation. But if you take anything from this slide, is that if you're looking for an on-premise security vendor, if you're looking at protecting your users, if you have an IoT environment, Cisco has the ability to enable solutions to offer that security resilience. And we've also moved away from the iPhone model where if you have an iPhone like I do and you need headphones, you need a pair of AirPods. Cisco's moved away from that, recognizing that our customers have multi-vendor environments, and so we're building open extensible platforms that allow native integrations with some of the major security players in the game. And what that means is it's not about ripping and placing your current investments. It's how do you invest in solutions that are going to complement what you've invested in already to ensure that you're maximizing ROI, simplifying management, increasing visibility. So we talk to a lot of customers, and what are the top of mind challenges? One of the things that we found is no matter the sector that you're in, the size of your organization, there's three problems that majority of organizations that we talk to are going through. Moving to the cloud, hybrid work, and threats becoming more advanced. When we think about move to the cloud, there are a number of organizations that are adopting cloud services, whether it be AWS, GCP, or Azure. And innately, that creates some particular threats around visibility and control, and sometimes misconfiguration. That's often a constant conversation that we're having as folks navigate moving between different clouds. Hybrid work, with the onset of the pandemic, has changed the ways that we work, right? We've seen a change happen in 2 years that may have taken organizations 10 years to get to. And so it's changed the need for many organizations, as hybrid work is no longer a nice to have, but a must in order to retain top talent, which has changed what the protections look like. All of your workers are no longer just under our firewalls. And so how do you ensure that you're protecting those exposures, whether they're working at Starbucks, they're working at home, or they're coming into the office? And then lastly, threats are becoming more advanced. I think whether you work in security or you work at the grocery store, you recognize the threat landscape, right? As you turn on the news, I think everybody's aware of the MGM hack that happened, right? We see what's happening with some of our hospitals and public sector institutions, even our educational boards. And what that identifies to us is that no organization is safe. Threat actors have access to tools like ChatGPT, right, which is giving them open, extensible ways to use things like ransomware as a service. Phishing emails are becoming more sophisticated. It's no longer looking for spelling errors because somebody else is writing it. And so how do you ensure that you have the right tool sets in place that in the incident of a breach or the incident of an attacker trying to enter your environment, that we're decreasing the time to respond? Do those problems resonate for folks in the room? So often a lot of the conversations I've been having over the last 6 months is around zero trust. And I think if you talk to 7 different people, 7 different vendors, you might get different responses around how they identify zero trust. And so for us, zero trust is not a product. There's not a single solution that offers zero trust. You can ask yourself, is it segmentation? Is it aligned to your endpoint, your EDRs? Is it enabled on a firewall? Is it identity? I mean, one thing that's clear is that these core capabilities on their own are not zero trust. But as zero trust is an architecture. And zero trust as an architecture requires these core capabilities in order to walk towards the zero trust infrastructure. When we think about zero trust, it's really a change in mindset and organizational culture. And so it's having conversations internally to understand where you are and where we want to start along this process. Because we can start around the endpoint or around an EDR solution. We could look at micro-segmentation within your environment. But we have to look at these as core capabilities and then ensure that there's communication and integration between these core capabilities. I mean, one thing's for sure, as you talk about zero trust, it really boils down to 3 main premises or principles. Never assume trust, always verify trust, and enforce least privilege trust. And how do we do this in an automated way? I recently attended an event, a CISO event, and they were talking about culture and a shift around culture and implementing security tools. And one of the directors of IT said that as they implement changes within their environment, they continue to get yelled at. And so I don't think it's a surprise when we talk about implementing stronger security that folks think that it decreases productivity. Whereas zero trust really works as the sweet spot between stronger security and higher productivity. And at Cisco, when we think about zero trust, or increasing overall security, it's really how do we focus on user experience while frustrating attackers and attackers attack access. And just as business decision makers think about zero trust, I think everybody has an intention of getting there, but just recognizing that getting zero trust right is essential for security resilience. And I think a key piece of that is when we think about business outcomes, as organizations, we think about how do we grow from where we are today to where we want to be in 3 years. And sometimes we don't have conversations around what do our processes look like. If we're a $5 million company today and want to get to a $10 million company tomorrow, how are we changing our internal processes? How are we changing how we're securing our environment as we grow? Because what's needed from a security perspective from where we are at $5 million and maybe a startup is going to be different than what's required as we start to mature as a company. The other piece that I found really interesting was a customer that spoke about they were recognized for an award, and they went from seeing 5,000 hits or attacks a day to 30,000. And so thinking about, one, attackers are paying attention and looking at organizations that are recognized, and the things that you think may not necessarily make you vulnerable ultimately could make you vulnerable. So Cisco's zero trust architecture is built on 4 pillars. Underneath those 4 pillars are focused on these core capabilities. For the purpose of today, I'm going to be talking about user and device security, but I think it's also mindful of thinking about network and cloud security. How are you ensuring compliance? Your compliance requirements are being met against your cloud infrastructures, as well as what does microsegmentation look like in your environment? Is there a need for your printers to have access to your financial assets? Right? How are we enabling microsegmentation in your environment all the way across your application and data security? So we've started to transition the way that we look at technology and how we make it easier for our customers and our partners to be able to consume. And so when we think about protecting our users or the human firewall, there's 6 core capabilities that we feel that are required for customers to have to ensure, one, that we're focused on user experience, but 2, that we're also enabling the right protections, whether they're in the office or they're working remotely. And so with email, with 80% of attacks originating in the email, it's important for us to look beyond just an email gateway as the active solution, a security solution to protect your workforce. Enabling pieces like secure access, where we're focused on changing the way we do things. Is it a requirement that your users always log on to VPN in order to access internal applications, whether they're legacy or SaaS-based? How do we make that decision for them on the back end so that all they're doing is logging in, getting access to your applications, and on the back end, we're enabling VPN or multi-factor authentication. And then secure endpoint, which is our EDR client, and then multi-factor authentication, which is a must for every organization. When you think about the multi-factor authentication solutions that you're using in your environment today, are these questions that you're asking of your vendors, or these conversations that you're having in your organizations? Do you have the ability to enforce these pieces? Are the devices that are connecting to your network managed? Is their software up to date? Right? Is the solution that you're using able to enforce users to ensure that they have 7 days to update their iOS or they won't be able to access the network? It does 2 things. It makes it easier to manage for your IT teams, which are becoming slimmer, And time is of the essence for a lot of security organizations to be able to be focused on more important pieces within your organization. But then it also puts the responsibility and the onus on your end user. And then also shifting that culture to a security-focused organization. Can you ensure that the device is password protected? In the event that a device is lost, that it's not just easy for someone to log in and now have access to your environment. And so at Cisco, we use Cisco Duo, which allows us to authenticate and verify user devices with some core capabilities. It not only provides multi-factor authentication, but it also allows us to look at device posturing. We get information in terms of where folks are located, where they're logging in from, but we can also look at the device. We can see, is the iOS updated, or if we're looking at a particular endpoint where we're seeing an increase in browser-based attacks, do you have the ability to ensure that the folks accessing your network are upgrading their Chrome browsers? And if not, can we provide details for them to be able to do that in 5 or 10 seconds? We've introduced verified endpoint trust, which allows us to block unmanaged or unknown devices from accessing our environment. And then it also enables geo-blocking. And so if there's regions that we recognize that we don't have staff in, and we're getting requests to log on to our networks from those regions where we generally would see some sort of threat attack, we have the ability to block those, and we can do it in an automated way. Ultimately, it provides greater visibility into laptops and devices that are entering your network. When we look at some of the thought leadership out there, what we find is 1 in 3 reported breaches could have been stopped if you had some sort of DNS layer protection in your environment. And this is as we think about folks leaving our office and working from a variety of different spaces. When they're not on the VPN, what do your protections look like? We see that over 100 to 200 billion, not million, 100 to 200 billion global losses could have been prevented by DNS protection. So how do you enable that? At Cisco, we have a solution called Cisco Umbrella. If we think about your EDR as your last line of defense, Cisco Umbrella is your first line of defense. It works at the DNS level. So in the instance that your email gateway doesn't capture a phishing attack, and someone that decides to use their laptop not only for work but for a personal device gets an email saying that you need to change your Netflix password, they haven't done the trainings that you subscribed, so they think that it's legitimate and are now clicking a malicious link. Umbrella works as your first line of defense that's going to block access to that link. And so it's adding in layers of protection. If your email doesn't capture it, then your DNS protection would capture it. We have the ability to spin up secure web gateways, cloud-delivered firing if we wanted to do tunneling, and then also be able to have core capabilities like data loss prevention. Right? How are we protecting IP within your own organization? How are you securing your secret sauce? And solutions like Cisco Umbrella allow us to not only just do DNS level protections, content filtering to ensure that your workers are productive, but also look at things like data loss prevention to ensure that information isn't being taken out of the organization and put those blocks in place. And then we can leverage things like remote browser isolation, which is, I think, specific to a use case that Umbrella provides from a competitive perspective, ensuring that you have protections for your C-suite individuals or high exposure folks within your environment. And then we also have the ability to manage this using Cisco's platform called XDR, which would give you a single pane of glass to manage both your Cisco investments as well as notable third-party investments as well. And that dashboard would allow you to investigate and correlate information, whether on your Cisco investment or third-party, but also remediate and respond to those threats all using a single dashboard, ultimately reducing the number of alerts that you have if you have a multi-vendor environment. And we're making it consumable, right? Is how do we simplify it rather than offering several different products, is how do we package it as one solution? And so if you're interested in having further conversations around what this looks like, reach out to have a conversation with myself, your Softchoice rep, or your Cisco account manager, and we could talk further around how easy it is to spin up a demo or to deploy this across your environment to ensure that your users are protected. As I close, I just want to leave you with 4 pieces in terms of what customers can do or companies can do. I think over 80% of cyber attacks originate through email. And so it's important to take a layered approach when you think about security. I think the other piece is we have to think about going beyond just an email gateway and looking at solutions like ETD, or also known as email threat defense, that look at both external and internal traffic coming into your network. It's using adaptive AI or adaptive intelligence to be able to understand when you're being sent business email compromise. So not only looking if there's a malicious link, it's looking at if there's a particular request and if that request is time sensitive. We had a case about a year ago where someone received an email. I think it was like the International Cricket Club or something of that sort, where they received an email from the CEO to wire over $500,000. And it needed to be done within the next half an hour. And so it didn't give that person enough time to do their due diligence. They probably also didn't have a process around what a financial request internally, and that had that experience, right? And so when we think about email, just ensuring that we're putting greater protections around that and added solutions. I think MFA, when you think about MFA, recognizing that it's not enough and it's really a starting place for organizations. So it's important for us to continue down that process of zero trust and starting to implement those protections across MFA, making sure that there's native integrations into your networking as well. And then developing incident response plans. I think I talked to a number of organizations and they don't have a plan in place in terms of what's your ransomware strategy, what happens in case of a breach. We're past the point where it's a conversation of if we get breached and a matter of when we get breached. And so having plans in place ensures that our team is aware of the steps that need to be taken in case of an incident. I think when you think about boxers, nobody trains while they're in the ring, right? They practice. And I think incident response is really preparing your organizations for when you're going up against that big fight. And then the last piece, which I think is a change that we're seeing in the industry, is best of breed shouldn't come at the expense of visibility. And when you have more mature organizations with larger security teams, it makes up for some of the lack of visibility. But now, I think at a particular point in time, there's a new core capability that we require. Let's find the best company that can offer it. There's a new threat. Let's find the best company that can offer it. And what we've created is multi-vendor environments that lack visibility and give us several different dashboards to have to manage that from. What we're moving towards is taking a platform approach. Which vendors are able to support our security needs and have the breadth from a solution perspective to be able to give us a solution that's integrated, increases our visibility, and simplifies our management. Appreciate the time today. All of the products that we offer from a SaaS-based perspective outside of the firewall, I think there's no better way to see if it works for your organization than to trial it. And so for us, it's easy to deploy and easier to trial. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Appreciate the time, folks.
Okay, Marquez, thank you so much. That was an extremely insightful presentation with so much to unpack within there. A couple things that jumped out at me. One is, the complexity of digital threats. I think we all know that, and I think that's part of the reason why we're all here today. Also, what's interesting is some of the solutions you mentioned, Marquez, Umbrella, Duo, email threat defense. I work at Softchoice, and my name's Nathan. I'm on our Cisco team. I can tell you that Cisco security solutions are the #1 solutions that we deploy when a new organization comes to us after they've been breached. And the nightmare is on. It's a terrible time, quite frankly, and these are some of the solutions, some of the essential solutions we deploy almost every single time. So Marquez, appreciate you calling those ones out specifically. I would also add as well, you called out that we have different people in different places. And that methodology, that Cisco methodology allows different individuals at different places to kind of find where they fit within. Where are they at today and what's next for them? So I think there's always a great dialogue to be had there. And I would add, if you're from Cisco or Softchoice, maybe you could raise your hand really quickly. Okay, perfect. These are all individuals who can speak to you about some of those solutions or help you connect with people who can speak with those solutions a little bit further. I want to do a quick little guessing game, so please humor me. It's not a test. Does anyone care to guess when the very first cybersecurity, well, we'll say cybersecurity breach happened in terms of years, what year it may have been? We heard 1965. Earlier? 39? Even earlier. We'll take one more guess. One more. Give me a number. We heard 1914. It's even earlier than 1914. It was 1903 when somebody found a way to hack in to somebody's Morse code, a code, whatever they did, transformation back then. So we know it was 1903. We don't know if it was someone masquerading as a prince from a foreign land promising great riches, but we do know it did happen in 1903. So cyber threats are not new, even though there are always new cybersecurity threats. And what's interesting is Marquez spoke about different people being in different places, and for that reason, it's great to hear from individuals with different points of view. So we're going to use the remainder of our time together today for a panel-based discussion. And with that, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists to the front of the room, please. And as they're coming and settling in, I'm going to share a quick story, a personal story. This happened a couple weeks ago. Welcome. So a couple weeks ago, my wife ordered a package to our house, and she had some concerns because it was taking a little longer than she had expected. And that was fine, no problem, that happens. The next day, I got a text from, quote-unquote, Canada Post. And I say quote-unquote because Canada Post was in brackets, as though it had been cut and pasted into this template. The grammar wasn't so good, which is sometimes a bit of a warning sign. And the link they wanted me to hit, that was an ugly-looking link. It was the link, the first type of link you learn to stay the heck away from. So I deleted it, and I kind of laughed at the irony. And then a couple days later, life started to happen. So my kids got sick. My email exploded. My car mechanic called and told me the repairs were going to be twice what he thought they would initially be. And that package still hadn't arrived. And I was kind of in the eye of the storm. I was tired, I was angry, I was hungry and frustrated. And then I got that exact same text. They sent it again. And in that moment, I just wanted some problems to go away. And I thought, maybe I can get rid of these texts and I can get this bloody package that my wife keeps bugging me about. So in that moment, that's when it happened. It moved. My thumb started moving. And it was going right toward that horrible, scary link. And at the very last second, sanity struck in. I stopped. I deleted that thing. They haven't sent any more, but I deleted it right away. But I was this close. And I've never been that close before. And it was a reminder to me that, our states can ebb and flow. At least my states can ebb and flow. But the cybersecurity threats are constant. And for that reason, it's so important to be prepared and be prepared at all times. And that brings us to the heart of our discussion today, centered around cybersecurity preparedness and best practices that exist that we've been hearing and seeing. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I will actually ask each of them to introduce themselves, maybe a little bit about your name, the organization, and that you work for, and why this topic is so important to you. Robbie, would you mind kicking us off?
Of course, thank you. My name is Robbie Shady. I work for Hayes in Canada. I was born and raised in Netherlands, and I started working for Hayes in 2011 as IT coordinator, and then in 2014 I was transferred to Canada as the IT manager for Hayes Canada. After 2 years I was promoted to my current role of IT Service Delivery Director.
We knew it was coming. There it is. It's that beeping.
How do I move? So I've been working in that capacity, responsible for the infrastructure for Hayes in the Americas, Canada, US, and Latin America. As we are one of the leading global recruitment companies in the world, obviously cybersecurity is a top priority. We process candidate data, client data, and of course our own data as well. So yeah, that is absolutely important to make sure that that is managed securely and governed well.
That's incredible, and all that international experience, I'm sure, creates a wealth of insights and learnings and insights into different risks taking place at different times and different places, all of which are quite scary, quite frankly. Nabil, how about yourself?
Awesome, thanks, Nathan. Is this not picking up? No, it is not. I will. Thank you. Hey everyone, Nabil here from Softchoice. Thank you for the time today. Essentially, a big part of my responsibility is getting an understanding of our clients' technology and operations. So as Robbie was mentioning, worldwide offices, complexity in terms of the practice and all the things that they're trying to accomplish. So what I mean from a technology perspective is the stuff that Marquise was touching on earlier today. What are our clients using from an endpoint, email, firewall perspective, so on and so forth, as well as getting an understanding of their IT operations. So how many folks do you have dedicated to security? Do you work with an MSP or an MSSP, or should you be doing that? And then we take an understanding of how your business is evolving as well, right? So do you allow remote or hybrid work? Do you allow BYOD? And we take all that information together to make recommendations on what we're seeing in the industry and best practices to essentially, in a nutshell, help you with risk management. That's what the job comes down to. And it's a fascinating space that's evolving very, very quickly, which is only going to be accelerated by AI. So I get to work with great folks and partners and meet interesting and get access to very, very interesting technology. So again, thank you for the time today. Looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome, thanks, Nabil. And I get, with that experience as well, I'm thinking, it's not just hundreds of organizations you've worked with to co-collaborate and support, but I would certainly in the thousands. So,
at this point, yeah, Bob.
Yeah, awesome. Really excited to hear more insights as we proceed. Faraz, how about yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello? Sorry, thank you. Good afternoon, Faraz Andrew. I work for a company called Cisco. Most of you may have not heard about it. It's a 50,000 strong employee company. We are a multinational public company. The head office in the UK. Our Canadian branch work under the North American branch in the US. And we primarily provide services on the behalf of the government. We run, we provide like citizen services in Canada and also in the line of defense. We actually run the drive test centers in the province of Ontario. We also run security guard and testing in the province of Ontario. We also recently got another contract for employment services in Ontario. And we run the world's largest NATO flying training center in Canada. That's in Moose Jaw. It's a 15-wing operation. We also run another 5-wing operation in Goose Bay. So these are kind of the main, stream in Canada, and we have large visit in the US. And again, I actually lead the infrastructure and service delivery teams within Cisco in Canada. And for those reasons, this topic is very important for me because we have such a large scale of business with all different, where it's customer facing, non-customer facing. We have to ensure this systems are safe at all times. So it's very critical for us.
Yeah, thanks, Faraz. Your experience is so interesting as well because, the reach of your organization is tremendous. And it's not just, one function across all the various sites. You have various different business units with completely independent and autonomous functions, stakeholders, groups. I can only imagine what that security estate looks like and the requirements behind that. And finally, Amy, how about yourself?
Wonderful. So my name is Amy Trong. So I'm from Softchoice. So I've been at Softchoice in many different roles, being also, an account executive, working with a lot of our customers. So right now, for the last couple of years, I'm leading what we call a specialty sales team. So I love my team. Like what we get to do is we get to have fun conversations with our customers, to help them with their strategy around, fun conversations around like AI, around how do you innovate, how do you optimize what your technology needs. And the reason why I'm here is I'm really excited to, so my team is all over North America, and we actually focus on SMB customers and helping them along that journey. And I've spent about half my career working with SMBs, and so as much as I love the big enterprise customers, sort of I have a special place for SMB customers because I want to see them thrive, and especially the ones that are in my backyard, so Toronto. So really glad to be here and impart any advice that I can to all of you.
Thanks, Amy. We're thrilled to have you here. As a Softchoice peer for many, many years, I can say Amy and the work her team does are continually recognized across the organization for the great support they offer and the successes that they bring for our client partners. So let's dive into some of the good stuff here. Robbie and Fraz, I'm going to ask you to start us off here. As we know, cybersecurity challenges are complex, they're rich, they're deep. I'm curious from your individual perspective, your own experience and point of view. Knowing that none of us know it all, and there's no website we can go to or book we can read to learn it all. So really interested in your specific individual experience. Within the walls of Hayes and Serco, what are some of the priorities that you have been tasked with, and some of the challenges pertaining to some of those priorities that are on your plate?
Yeah, I can talk about that for hours, by the way, but we'll not do that. But the way we approach is that we have looked at, we first looked at our platform a couple of years ago. Our setup was basically a traditional network setup, so you have infrastructure in the office, people connecting in the office, mostly using desktops. And then with the pandemic, basically everybody was forced to work from home, so you have to transform, you have to think, Marques had a couple of great pointers on his presentation on that. How can you make sure that people can still access their work sources, but also in a secure manner? So we looked at the setup we had, and we basically said, we are going to use a risk-based approach. So we have looked at the setup of our offices. What we have done is we have removed, I would say, most of the physical infrastructure. We transformed that to Wi-Fi only offices. My team basically nicknamed it to Starbucks Wi-Fi offices. So because in essence what we now provide in all 27 of our offices in the Americas is that you go to an Hayes office, you have just Wi-Fi. So people come in and they can just work the same way like at Starbucks, Wi-Fi at home, at the airport. So that is one of the things we adapted from Zero Trust, like Zero Trust Network model as we call it. Another thing we have done, multi-factor authentication. I would say that's key. Any organizations, I would say most organizations should have that by now, but any organizations which haven't applied that or implemented that they should do that as quickly as possible. Also single sign-on functionality, so you're basically limiting the work sources to only to be accessed through a work email. So that is one of the things we implemented. We also started our employees making them aware of the cybersecurity threats we are facing, best practices in general. So those are, let's say, a couple of the key things we have done in coming back to your question. What we also, the challenges for that is sometimes you lack resources. You also have budget resource issues because you need to invest in cybersecurity, which is not cheap. So it's also very expensive. Resistance from employees to adapt to security measures because they say, why is this blocked? Why is this? I want my email now. For example, Marques touched base on it. Email is one of the main gateways where cyber threats are coming from. And what you then see is, when an email is coming with an attachment, our system is holding that back, scanning, making sure that it's safe, and then releasing it. And my employees are asking me, hey, I need this. Why do I need to wait, right? So that is a couple of the things. Also rapidly evolving threats every day. I mean, you heard every day a new form of ransomware or a new form of attack is happening. And also balancing security with user experience and productivity, because we also want our people to be productive. We give them KPIs, so they need to be reaching targets. So there's always a balance in that. So that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, those are complex, broad set of challenges. Put your hands up in the room if you can relate to any of those challenges within your organization as well. Yeah, that makes sense. I can't imagine not hitting on any of those. Some really interesting perspectives. That Wi-Fi branch by branch model is also extremely compelling as well, and sounds quite dynamic and innovative.
Yeah, it also simplifies the setup you have in the offices, and of course you still need to make sure that people can access their sources every day, but it helps in two things: simplifying it, but also making it more secure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great best practice there. Fraz, how about yourself?
Again, as you mentioned, we operate in different segments of the businesses, and again, for us, one formula fits all doesn't work for us. So we have to look at, the jurisdiction, the compliances, and all that. So for a mature, large organization, it's easier that we don't have to go and try to get the budget. The budget is already there. So there's no issue on the funding as such. We can pick up any tool that we want. It's more of a what do you want to deploy where. For example, I'll come back to our examples in Ontario. Like, we run multiple programs with the government, and one being the drive test centers. We have around 100 centers throughout the province of Ontario. And we have to start with the basics. Again, when we work with the government, there are a lot of regulations, that comes in play. For example, there are no Wi-Fi allowed, to start with. And then how do we get the basic right? I remember when I joined this job 6 years ago, I did a visit at some of the location at the drive test center. And when I went to one center, and I said, can I just go and look at the LAN room? So I went to the LAN room, and I saw the rack. It looked like a spaghetti, the cables were all over. It was so bad. And I wrote an email to my boss, who was VP in the US. I said, we have a big issue here. We have to fix the foundation. With the cabling of this sort, and the ports which are not managed, forget the security, at a high level, but the basics are not good. And the response I got was that we don't have budget to fix it, because we did have the budget for the InfoSec, tools and techniques and whatnot, but the basics, because we had actually taken this over from ministry, that was a legacy network, and we were just running it as is. So, but then I had to look creatively at, and I looked at the amount of dollars we were spending to maintain that aging kit was so high that I could bring that budget forward and spend and modernize that. So we started modernizing the whole network at these drive test centers, and that was the first thing we did. So again, going back to the basics, the basic has to be right. You have to have a very strong, good foundation to start with. And then second is, again, you have to have a risk management, risk-based management program there. You have to look at all different angles, where there could be a breach. For example, again, let's look at the example of drive test. COVID hit, most of the services were shut down, so our drive test center was shut down for 6 months. And this being a key service to the Ontarians, after 6 months, when we opened services, we had a backlog of 1 million road tests. So there were 1 million people trying to book the road test. They're trying to hit the website, these people trying to book the slot. Usual slot that were available within a month's time, people were not able to book for a road test for 1 year. So imagine what happened. That created an opportunity for the gray market. There are gray market, big companies set up who would bring up the sites that looks like drivetest.ca, somewhat, with different names, have same logos, and they will try to charge a premium to book a road test for you. So, and people will go to them, pay $100, $200. So there was a $5 million a month market was running to actually book the road test. And what these companies are doing, they were running very sophisticated scripts to hit our system hard, to block the slots and then sell it for the premium. Now, why I call it gray market? Because our legislation does not stop them to do so, because they take the consent from the applicant that they can book it on their behalf. So we can actually go and legally shut them down. So we have to go a step ahead of them and try to protect the system, not on the firewall level, but at the perimeter level. And again, working with partners like Softchoice, we kind of developed our perimeter security by deploying a bot management using Cloudflare. where we could deploy a small piece of software on browsers where they will actually check if the applicant trying to book road test, with the telemetry data, if they are human or their scripts, give a bot score and kind of block them. So that's how we control them right at the parameter. But that was not all. We then deployed things like virtual queue, where you can put people in the queue again, and there the scripts will drop out. So we deployed a lot of things, and the parameter to kind of control this. So, and we were able to control it that way. But again, that's not it. I mean, these bad actors will try everything possible to try to infiltrate. So again, based on looking at our attack surface area and see wherever they can infiltrate, will protect those systems. So again, as Marcus was saying, zero trust is just not one thing, right? It's a mix of everything. We have to look at all different segments and see we have to block or secure every small part of it. So that's how we actually operated and kind of provide the services. Yeah,
Faraz, I find that amazing. That is, to me, it's absolutely mind-blowing that, one, you're actively at warfare with bad actors, let's say, day in, day out, who are setting up these bots to, grab all the drive spots and then resell them to people. I would say, these people would put Ticketmaster to shame and some of their best practices. I think that's a tremendous battle to be fought as well. At $5 million a month as well, I'm disgusted, but part of me says maybe I'm in the wrong business. That sounds kind of interesting.
And trust me, if you go to Google and try to search for the drive tests, those sites come at the top. They're paying money for the ads and all that. So our drive tests will be much later. I mean, we have to work with Google and kind of get them blocked. But a newcomer, a new immigrant, or anybody who's trying to get the new driver license, I mean, they would not know. They will just go search for the site, and some site will open, OntarioDriversLicense.com that look like, a government site, and people fall for it.
Amazing, amazing. And also, it indicates there are so many battles to be fought, right? There's the traditional threat parameters, there's industry-specific, company-specific. Those are very sophisticated solutions that you and your team are implementing. You also mentioned something really compelling there as well in terms of budget. And, if the budget was unlimited, life would be wonderful, and this would probably be simpler than it is today, but the reality is budget is limited. And, one of our adages at Softchoice is, cost-effective security still needs to be effective security. So Nabil, I'll turn it over to you. Would you say, can you relate to other organizations you work with? Do you encounter organizations experiencing similar challenges to what Robbie and Fraz shared, and how to, what are some things you and your team do to help to navigate it? Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, there we go. Yes, budgets come up constantly, and the idea is to get an understanding of where the customer is at. For example, we were having a conversation earlier about security awareness. Now, there's multiple ways to tackle that problem. We had a discussion about, well, whose responsibility is it? If you're working with a service provider, does it fall on them or does it fall on your internal team? Now, let's say because of competing budget priorities, we can make a recommendation for a solution which you would then manage internally to then be responsible and say, let's utilize the software to make sure that people are protected and they're aware of where the risk lies. The other way to look at it is maybe you don't have the time for that, or there are other organizations who are focused on strategic objectives, or there's just not enough people in the IT department. Well, there's a managed service around that we can recommend, really to hone in on the value of the solution and building a program around it. Marquise talked about culture and changing this culture of an organization. That's the value of the service, right? We can recommend a product, but the idea is to go and implement it, build a training program around it, make sure that the KPIs are met, make sure that the folks who are failing the phishing tests, you can account for that and they're held accountable for that. As well as we have the data to see who's more likely to be attacked. Typically, it's your executives, they're always gonna be attacked. But in certain situations, let's say if you're going through an M&A, legal's gonna get hit up because there's sensitive information there. They're getting more creative in the way that they approach attacks, right? So we talked about how earlier email is still one of the #1 threat vectors, but what we're seeing now, unfortunately, is that that's evolved to collaboration tools, right? So it'll look like somebody from your organization is pinging you on Teams or Slack or whatever it is. What they're really doing is sharing a link that's going to lead you to maybe a malicious website or to launch something nefarious. So the idea is we're going to work with you to understand your IT objectives and then meet you where you are to make recommendations to say, well, this is the technology that can solve the problem, or if you're ready for it, this is the service. If not, how do we help you prioritize, right? security in itself, there's so many different topics that we can touch on, and you said we could talk about this for hours, which is absolutely true. So part of that is getting the visibility and understanding of your technology and operations and saying, this is where your risk lies, this is where you should start, and let's build out a 6, 12, 24-month roadmap. So that's kind of how we tackle it. You brought up an interesting point earlier about the URLs and the fake websites that were unfortunately taking advantage of folks. So one of the ways to approach that was botnet protection through Cloudflare. The other ways that, just to be awareness and for the sake of dialogue, is when you're looking at your security solutions, you're looking at dynamic solution providers, right? So are they constantly updating their white and black list to say these websites shouldn't be accessible, right? And they should be blocked automatically. Now that's not an easy thing to do. So how do you select the right vendor or the right solution to do that? Part of that is threat intel, which Marquise touched on earlier. If you have all that data being collected from, your organization works in multiple, jurisdictions, well, you're going to be the first one to update those lists to say, hey, part of the value of this solution is to make sure that as the hackers get more sophisticated and they never stop and never stops, that we can stay ahead of that and allow our organization to become proactive versus reactive. Now, it's easy for me to say that looking back. I also was the person on the call in my team and Nathan's team when COVID hit, and it was, as we talked about earlier, chaos and a little bit of panic. Having this information now, it's easier to make the recommendation, but the whole idea is to, again, look at where you are today and get you to ideal state, because we know that the attack surface is expanding. The way that they get to you is expanding. We're talking about things like, it's going to be hit on every single panel discussion is AI, right? So when we talk about things like phishing, well, what happens, Marquise brought up a story about the CEO they asked somebody to wire $500,000. Well, somebody like a CEO is going to have a lot of public-facing data out there, videos of them speaking. So what the AI can do now is mimic their voice and send it to their finance department and say, hey, this needs to be paid today, I'm getting on a plane, or whatever, something that would make sense for their persona and the responsibilities that they have. Now that brings it to a whole another level of sophistication that you have to be aware of and plan for. Sorry, I got into it.
No problem. But that's the truth, right? It never ends, right? There's always a new risk and a new threat and a new approach and a new technology. Amy, curious, our panelists have shared quite a bit of insights on some of their challenges, priorities. Anything that you frequently hear from organizations that you and your team work with that you would add to the discussion?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that, we talk a lot about, just with our customers, just about moving to the cloud, doing really fun things like adopting Gen AI and having some of those conversations. And underpinning all of that is really looking at your security strategy. So that is a big area that we talk to customers about, because you have to think about that, right? But I do want to get pragmatic, because obviously with sort of SMBs, like there's limited budgets, right? Guess what? You're not a big bank, right? So one of the things that I always recommend for SMB companies, organizations, is, and you had touched on it earlier, Marquez, is really around best of breed, right? So you don't necessarily need to purchase best of breed, because the thing is that when you work with companies, much like Cisco, you can bundle, right? So you have more buying power, right? Purchasing power. So like those pragmatic things I would definitely focus on. We talked a lot about culture, right? So that's an easy thing, right? Like just educating your users around like, sort of what are the best practices are, what are some of the things they need to watch out for, right? Like, sort of Nathan, you had a great example to kick us off around like how you're in this mental state, but then you stopped yourself. Like, just really being, sort of like talking about it constantly. What we do at Softchoice is that we actually do this all the time, right? So we do pen testing, and then there's also like, let's say if you accidentally click on a link, there's remediation. So you have to go through 6 hours of training, right? There is like something to that. So I think, just those little things are really important. I think for companies, like when you're breached by security, like you have a security breach, hindsight's 20/20. So you want to be vigilant, right? So I think it's critically important that organizations always have like what I call a rainy day fund for when these situations arise. Like it's critically important because one of these incidences could unfortunately put you under, right? So you want to have a rainy day fund. So I would definitely recommend that.
That sounds like a great strategy. Appreciate all the insights around the challenges, which are vast, and some of the priorities each of you have faced in your respective day-to-day worlds. Curious as well some of the solutioning around it. So here we are fighting these battles every day. Sometimes it's a two-step forward, one step back type of pursuit. Robbie, I think you mentioned some of the end user challenges and them revolting almost at certain times. I'm curious, I wouldn't mind a couple insights from everybody around best practices in terms of some of the things that are working and that have been really helpful in your pursuits.
In that case, so I already mentioned multi-factor authentication was a great step forward. Single sign-on is another one. But also what we applied is mobile device management. So our employees do want their access their emails 24 hours a day, I would say. But we implemented mobile device management so they can access the Hays emails if they want. But before that is functional, the device needs to be secured either through face recognition, passcode, before it's even enabled. And the second step is they can access the emails and attachments, but they cannot download it on the device itself. So this is one of the things we have applied. But it gives both security, but also the access to the information. Most of our sales teams are recruiters, so they get emails from the candidates, the clients, so they want that information 24 hours a day. So that's one of the things what helped us. Another implementation of Zero Trust is conditional access. So what we have done is we basically have limited access to Hays resources only to authorized devices. So that way you're reducing the risk at the same time as well. That they can access the resources, systems, what they need to do either through VPN or through the web. But that can only be happening on the device we have prepared, configured, and managing. So those are the things. We have also, the other thing, of course, a training program to every quarter we have a Fish Me exercise. So we make sure that people get a new form of Fish Me email, which is representing what's happening today. QR code is one of the things which is highly. I was at Sector 2023 2 weeks ago, and one of the stands had a QR code scan here for free iPods, and you saw a line of 40 people scanning. And then what happened is after they scanned, they said, "Listen, this was a phishing exercise." Right. But everybody wanted to have a free iPhone or AirPods. And they scanned it all, right? So that is another example. So awareness is really important.
Yeah, great examples. Curious as well, in your employee quarterly phishing pursuits, are you finding the number of employees who click on the trap? Are you finding it going down, or is it consistent?
It is sometimes it's going down, I have to say. I mean, the first time we did it, it was quite high. But as you can see, it is really going down because people are becoming more aware. But you do have still people who say, okay, I clicked it because I'm expecting a package from Amazon, or I clicked it because I thought it was trustworthy, right? So they are not looking at the obvious, sometimes obvious factors which say, hey, this is not secure. And a lot of these threats are filtered through our systems, but sometimes they are not, because I always say no defense is 100%. I mean, that's the challenge here. But you can make people aware, because internally we say, listen, our employee is the first line of contact where either a threat is being initiated by clicking on a link, opening an attachment. So those are the awareness. That is the key factor, and making sure that they have a good understanding of best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I think lots of people can relate to that. And Fraz, how about yourself in terms of some of what's been working with you in the Circo environment?
Again, different items. So for us, I mean, personally, what I believe is we have to make the system, secure by default or by design. That's the best way to go. If they're not, secure by design, there will be always a chance of, the moment you leave things on, patching, on human, related tasks, there's a huge gap there. So as much as you can automate and make them secure by design or by default, that's the way to go. But at the same time, we cannot just leave covering one item. For example, your user end security or firewalls. So you have to look at multiple items. For example, in our environment, we have a SIM solution where, we get all of the intel, information. We collect all sorts of logs, because if any bad actor is trying to inflate your system, I mean, the chances are they would have already done it years ago. So to compromise the system, I mean, it takes them, months, weeks, months, years, so that small piece of software may be sitting in your system collecting data, right? So if you have this SIM software or SIM solution that kind of, collect the logs and look at that, abnormalities in the system, that's the best way. Again, working with Softchoice, we deployed a solution from Cisco Tetrration. That is a great solution as well, that collects all that, intel and give us the information if something that is happening that's not usual. So we can pick up those sort of, signature from the traffic going on between the internal environments. So not only we have to protect the system externally, but we have to look at our internal environment at all times, that if something is going on there. So again, going back, it's not one thing. We kind of protect all different attack surface areas where possible.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. It's kind of humbling that, the greatest area of vulnerability is human vulnerability. We are almost essentially using technology to protect us from ourselves, which is quite interesting. So that gives us some great purview on kind of what's been working and some of those core challenges. I want to jump into the future as well, because this is a never-ending, ongoing pursuit. Amy, I'll start with you. I'm curious about some of your perspectives. Where do you see things going? Where are things starting to turn in your experiences? What do you think lies ahead?
Yeah, so there's a lot out there. I think right now, like we're talking about Gen AI, right? So pretty much, I think I was reading something where 40% of, sort of C-levels are using, ChatGPT, right? So like, they're putting company information into this model and it's feeding it, right? So, but there are other solutions out there that we need to be vigilant about, and that I would say, like, definitely, I think part of it comes with like educating yourself, coming to these types of conferences and learning more about that. So focusing on like upskilling and things of that nature. So I think that, like IoT, like that's a big topic, right? So everything's connected to the internet. Your refrigerator is, my stove is, like all sorts of things, right? And that's a huge attack vector for us, right? So being vigilant about that. So those are like sort of the two big areas that I think, there's a lot of more vulnerabilities. Even the time of year, like the holiday shopping right now, right? Like a lot more activity as it pertains to, sort of like putting people at, sort of like making people a little bit more vulnerable. Because again, work is busy, life is busy, holidays are happening, right? So, I think like one of the most studied things is really around human behavior. And we've talked a lot about how human behavior is like probably the biggest attack vector, right? So, so we just have to be vigilant, like pretty much all the time. And it really comes down to education.
Agreed.
The unfortunate reality is that the hackers only have to be right once. Like you were telling that story about the state you were in emotionally, or any of us are in, and Amy's mentioning, shopping time and Christmas. Well, unfortunately, if they can take advantage of you especially at one time, especially at the SMB level, it can be an existential threat, right? You were talking about the importance of budgeting and planning ahead and making sure you have that rainy day fund, right? That's the business perspective of looking at it, and that's absolutely important. And we're also going to be talking about what you said about having the right solutions in place so that you can pick it up before it becomes to a point where it's a huge problem, right? You talked about SIM solutions, and one of the things that we notice with SIM solutions is that, let's say there's a data exfiltration happening, right? Or there is somebody in your systems and you're not aware of it. I think the average time is around, depending on the source you look at, 3 to 4 months where they're doing reconnaissance before the organization's even aware that they've broken into your systems. So the SIM solution will pick that up from utilizing the AI and say, all this data that's not supposed to be leaving this user's, our network is leaving, what's going on? Let's shut that down, let's follow the right processes to alert the right people so you can stop that attack before it gets very, very bad, right? You talked about something very interesting that I kind of want to circle back on if it's okay. That constant balance between productivity and efficiency, as well as we want to make sure we're secure, right? So when we're talking about the future and AI, and we touched on MFA a few times, well, we want to look at things like adaptive MFA, right? So we know Nathan, we know what devices he uses, the corporate issued Softchoice laptop, maybe his personal one, maybe his cell phone. We know where he logs in from, right? The office, his home office, wherever it's from. When we look at those factors, we want to see when is it appropriate to ask for that second level of permission for that text or that authentication through the application, because he's accessing something that's maybe sensitive, customer data, or something that we're working on, or Cisco's working on, that's going to be changing the market or having a huge impact on the way that we do business. Is that time, or? I don't.
Any ideas what the music is? Oh, okay, it's just triggering that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're yeah. So before we wrap things up, just some parting thoughts as well. Sorry, yes, no, Bill.
Sure,
sorry, we jumped in there. We all got
yeah,
distracted by the.
Yeah. One thing I did want to make aware. So 2 years ago, one of our competitors was in the news because they have suffered a data breach, and I dug into that, and then it found out they were not breached themselves, but one of their vendors was hacked. So that is also something I think is important to realize, that partners you work with, companies, external companies who are processing your data, and be mindful that they also ensure that they are following the same best practice, secure policies, because if you can have your own environment completely secure, but if one of your vendors is hacked and your data is in open, everybody will point to you and say, listen, hey, your company data is there, right? So you are in the news then, while it's not even your own fault. So that is one of the things I just wanted to
Yeah, I remember you sharing that is a challenge. And Fraz, I'll let you take us home here. What's your final perspective for everybody here on what's ahead, and what's ahead for you at Serco as well?
Sure. See, I mean, we know for a fact in the future, more things are getting connected. It'll be more smart cities. Everything will be with 5G, Wi-Fi 6, 7. Everything will be connected, and which will again increase the attack vector as well. They talk about this analogy, the digital twin. So when you're trying to bring the digital twin live, we have to also think about the physical security digital twin into cybersecurity as well. So we should not forget that part of things as well. So I think that's very important that the more we connect it, the more integration we're doing, the more application we're onboarding, for example, SaaS application, all that. We have to be very careful, checking the vendors. For example, we check if they're SOC 2 type 2 compliant, if they're PCI DSS compliant, depending on the services they're hosting. We ensure that all the compliances are there. If they're using a multi-tenant environment, how the segregation is done. So we have to ensure that we also kind of vet all the vendors.
Yep, absolutely. So another thing to add to the to-do list, of course. So Rob, you said it earlier. We really could talk about all of this for hours. It is such an incredible topic. Obviously, time is up for us today. I do want to extend a few thank yous first to Toronto Regional Board of Trade for providing this platform for us to share and connect and share some of our best practices. Also to Marquez and our speakers here today for sharing their insights with everybody, and each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to come and participate in our discussion and join us for the conversation. Let's not let the conversation end. We'll be out here networking. You have Softchoice and Cisco resources always available to you at any time. Please don't be shy about reaching out. We're always here to help. So once again, I thank everybody and wish everybody a great day today, the remainder of your day.